How deep do the divisions in our nation run? It's easy to feel deeply divided if you go on social media, if you watch the news, and certainly if you're anything like me and you look at the polls that indicate people across the country think that we're a very divided place. I've wondered a little bit about whether or not people are feeling that divide in their personal life, or if it's something that they more see online or in the news. I've seen loads of articles out there about, some random person who has cut off their family because of some political issue, or doesn't speak to their brother anymore because of how that person voted. I want to have a better sense of whether or not our guests feel this divide in their personal lives, and if it's more difficult, if not impossible, to be friends with people who see the world very differently than we do. So I asked each of them whether or not it's more difficult to be friends now with people who see the world differently than you do, or if that's sort of an overblown sense, an overblown thing that's out there that's maybe overhyped and not exactly real. I asked them all. Be interested to see what they have to say.
Do you think at this point in our history, it is especially difficult, or is this overblown? It is especially difficult for people who have just completely diametrically opposed views on these kinds of issues to be really good friends?
I think it goes back to the internet of it all, because again, I feel like when you're just talking to someone, even if it's about politics, I think if you want to have an honest conversation and not just try to score points, then you can be friends. I think you can. I have friends. I have friends who are, like I said, are opposite side of the political spectrum from me. And when we talk about those things, which, we don't do a ton of, but when we do, we think of this crazy concept. We try to be thoughtful of each other's feelings, and not just try to see who can dunk on the other one first and fastest, right? So I do think that there's a way to bridge that gap. My parents live in South Carolina right now. My sister and her family lives in South Carolina. They lived in Charleston for years. My parents retired and moved with my sister down there. They lived in Charleston for years, and they moved up to Greenville. And like I said, my parents are like ex-hippies. My sister and her family are pretty liberal. They live in the place that's literally called Trumpistan, right? Because it is so right-wing. They have tons of friends. They're very active in their church. They are very active in their school. They have great lives, frankly. I'm jealous, frankly. They're like storybook lives in a lot of ways. So 100% you can overcome these things. It doesn't mean that you're going to agree at the ballot box. It doesn't mean that you should go onto that person's Facebook page and start reading what they're posting, because it can get ugly. But when we're just dealing with each other as people in real life, absolutely. I think you can still have these relationships.
It's sometimes it's possible. Sometimes it's really not possible at all. So sorry, I'm texting my kid. I'm like, your voice is so loud. Please close your door. That's that small entertainment, #mom life. But I don't know. Could we be friends? Define friends.
Like close friends, like the kind of person who I imagine we can probably work together. I imagine there's probably people who you and I work with who disagree with us very much. But in terms of like a close friend, like someone who you sort of unburden yourself to, who sees the world very differently.
So I think sometimes people, if we vote differently, sometimes people are, whatever. Could you be close friends? Yes. I think it depends on a bunch of different factors. You're never going to agree politically 100% with somebody, right? At the same time, I don't know. It takes a lot more than just a political vote to define somebody as whether or not you can be friends. I'm not going to cut somebody out because, they voted some way. A part of me, again, because I'm in the good camp, is going to be like, they were just led astray.
Yeah. I think it may even be on a person-to-person basis. I would say I would maybe even say that it's probably like never been easy. So, not to say that it's like it's harder now. It's probably always been hard. Is it, maybe there are more factors involved? Like, is it more accepted? Like, are you going to be ostracized as, someone in your liberal social groups if one of your good friends comes to dinner wearing a Trump hat? Like, are you going to be, made fun of or judged, because of that? I think that is adding a lot more, kind of like flavor to that conversation. But as far as like the friendships themselves or the discussions themselves, I don't necessarily think so. Because people have been, even outside of politics, disagreed on, been on polar opposites of decision points on many other things and have still been able to, maintain friendships or whatever, even husbands and wives sometimes.
Again, for me, it's a moral issue, more of a moral issue. I am always going to wonder, like, do you think I'm less than you because I'm not white? Do you think that I'm less than you because I'm not a guy? Do you think that you're better than everyone else? Like, at what point am I going to see your cruelty? At what point are you not going to care about, like, children who go hungry or are thrown further into poverty? Like, I cannot stand the cruelty that we're seeing. Ripping, they deported a 2-year-old U.S. citizen. I'm not cheering for that. So I think at this point, no, and I know that, again, my own bias, but I am judging you on your vote, your moral compass on your vote. And that is where I am right now.
I think it's a hard thing for a lot of people. And I know people that have cut, family members out of their life because they disagree politically. And man, is that relationship really like worthless to you that you would be willing to sacrifice it over something so inconsequential? Right. I'm not saying that politics is inconsequential. It's definitely not. But man, when I go out and ride bikes with my daughters, like, I'm not worried about. That's not at the forefront of my mind. It's not the most important thing in that moment, right? And life is made up of those moments. So why would you allow it to consume such a huge part of who you are? I think so. I think you might have to work at it and remember that that's a person on the other side. It's not just an idea set. But yeah, I'm still friends with people from very broadly different political spectrums. I don't think that politics should be the defining, factor in our life. It's not the most important thing. It just isn't.
I think it's harder than it used to be, but I don't think it's impossible. But I think it's harder because it's now like it cuts deeper, right? It's not like, I don't know, what were we arguing about in like the late 90s and early aughts? Whether argued about Iraq, right? Like, no one argued about whether it is a good idea to defend a democracy, right? But it was like, what does it take? At what point do we go in? What's the exit plan for once we're out, right? Those are the things that I feel like that were talking points and arguing points. Now it's like huge value differences that are harder to like justify, because it means a bit more about what you value as a person, right? And it's now more like, I don't know if I can be friends with you if you can't call someone out that's an admitted sexual predator, or I don't know that that's like, it feels like a deal breaker for me, right? That like you're able to support someone that has a hard time criticizing Nazis, right? Like if you had asked me again 10 years ago, what's the easiest group that you could get the most consensus are the bad guys? Nazis, right? Like literally the top of my list. And now I like those bigger shifts, right? Or those bigger value differences, I think is what makes it harder, because it's not civic dialogue where we're all acting in good faith. And it's just like policy of how we get there. No, now we're talking about bigger value differences. And there's a difference of, I don't think you're actually acting in good faith. If you're not acting in good faith, those are harder hurdles to overcome. Or your guy on your side is saying this, and that's not a deal breaker for you. How is that not a deal breaker for you?
At some point, I like to believe that that's what was going on. You know, there were times, I think I'm too young. I think by the time that I became old enough to really know what was going on in politics, it was already becoming very polarized. Yeah. But I do believe there was a time when, you know, there would be Republican senators voting on bills that were proposed by Democratic senators and all that stuff, and like voting against or across party lines and being friendly with one another and working together. What do they call it? Bipartisanship, like true bipartisanship. Like, I like to believe that that's what was going on at some point, you know, and it was working. The gas and the brakes were working together. And now that just doesn't seem possible.
I think it is possible. I think you have to really be able to, have open dialogue, but also you're assuming good intent from the other person, and I would imagine that in some cases, it might be people who have, known each other for a long time and have always known that they were, one was on one side of the aisle and one was on the other, politically. But I think those relationships are certainly very realistic and possible.
I don't think it's overblown at all. I can see it. Yeah. I mean, people are trusting each other less. It's hard to talk to people now who have a different belief system than you, because they are their core, to me, it seems like their just core morals and beliefs are so completely opposite from who I am. How can I trust that they are not just that they want what's best for the country, but that they are going to treat me with respect, right? So, I mean, my son's a type 1 diabetic. And, one thing that had been a huge thing for millions of Americans is just the ridiculous cost of prescription drugs, right? One way that we can bring the cost of these drugs down and stuff is by having single payer health insurance. And I was trying to talk to somebody who, this is back in 2018, 2019, about that. It's like, hey, you can pay, a little bit more in taxes, less overall, a little more in taxes though, maybe, to have access to these drug prices that the rest of the world has. And more personally, it means that my son won't die because he doesn't have insurance once he ages out of mine, right? Like, I mean, he's just a kid. He didn't do anything to get type 1 diabetes. It's just something that happened. I mean, wouldn't you be willing to pay a little more so people just don't die? And their response was, nah, no. So how can you trust somebody like that who doesn't care if somebody else lives or dies because they don't have access to health insurance because they don't want their tax to change a little bit?
But now, with the current situation, it just seems like the stances of one side are in such stark contrast to the values of the other side when it comes down to things such as basic human rights. You know, it seems hard for me to believe that I could have a strong platonic relationship with someone who doesn't think that my other friend shouldn't enjoy the same rights and freedoms that I should.
After speaking with all of our guests, it's pretty clear that each of them has a strong sense that it is way more difficult now to be friends or have a deep, meaningful relationship with someone who sees the world differently than they do. I think each of them had a certain sense that that was a sad thing. I think each of them had a sense that it's not an ideal place to be as a nation, as a person. I think for some of them, you saw a certain lament in the way that they were thinking about these problems. Some thought that it was at least possible to be friends. Some didn't. And I think it's a good indication sort of the challenges that we faced. Like I said at the top of the show, all the surveys say we're a divided place. The news says we're a divided place. Social media certainly says we're a divided place. And you sort of see it in the responses of our guests here that, yeah, you know what, like not only are we divided, as we've heard in previous episodes, but it sort of filters down into personal lives. Sort of, while each of them had sort of a slightly different take on it, it was certainly, for me anyways, a challenging conversation and a challenging sort of moment of realization that it's not just something we see in the press. It's not just something we see in social media. It's something that's touching everybody's lives. And it's really filtering down to like the lowest levels of just everyday life for the people that I was discussing this with. I'm David Combs. This is Nobody's Side. I'll see you next time.